Hello, everybody. Hope you can hear me. Hope you can see the screen. So it should be in our presentation once again. Let me please know if you can hear me and if you can see everything on the screen. So I'll additionally try to quickly readjust my windows. Like this. Yeah, everything looks good so far. Let's wait for a couple of minutes so to everyone to join. Today we will talk about the serverless in the AWS. So actually serverless is just not a bunch of the resources, it's a methodology, I would say. So whenever you deploy in your application with the serverless pattern. So you don't need to provision or to maintain any. Sorry, there may be some noises outside. Okay, everything is good. Where was I? So yeah, about the serverless. So if you're talking about the serverless, it's an approach where we can deploy in our application without the needs of maintain or create, deploy any servers at all. So we can just deploy in our code and it will be enough to run our application to work. So all of the connections, internal, external, it doesn't matter, will be managed by by AWS themselves. Let's have a quick look on our agenda for today. First of all, we will talk about the Lambda. Lambda is one of the most interesting, I'd say, and powerful tool in the AWS if we are talking about the deployment of our applications. Next, we will talk about the API Gateway. API Gateway is kind of, I'd say, gateway for our incoming connections. So whenever the user try to reach in our application, this user will first try to reach in our API gateway. He'll need to authorize against it or maybe just get some information from it. And then the API gateway will route this request to the necessary endpoint. And in this third task, if we are talking about the third task, it will be just a Lambda function. We'll briefly also talk about the pricing of all of these resources, and then you'll have a question to ask your questions. Okay, let's move on. If we look closely at this picture, so we can see the different approaches, the different kinds of interaction with Lambda functions. So first one is synchronous. If we are talking about the synchronous, so as you can see on this picture, so it's just an API gateway. Whenever we are calling the API gateway endpoint, so for example, API gateway URL / order, this API gateway will redirect this request to the Lambda function. It will trigger the Lambda function and try to get the information. When I'm saying trigger Lambda function, I mean, so let's say we have a code. And this code just should go to the database, for example, retrieve some data from it, and give it in the format which is necessary for us, which is important for us. So, for example, JSON or just something like this. And if we are triggering this Lambda function, it will just run in our code, give us in our desired data, and just disappear. And the most interesting fact about this one is what we don't need to pay for these Lambda functions when they are not operating. So only when they have some requests from our customers, from our end users, we'll pay only for this amount of time this Lambda function is running in our code. So this is kind of cool. And if you're talking, if we will move forward, so there's also an asynchronous pattern. And in this case, Lambda function can react on some events which are triggered from the AWS. So all of you, I hope, already familiar with the Amazon S3 bucket. So it's just a place where we can store in our files. And they can make in our Lambda function to be triggered whenever we put in something in this S3 bucket. So for example, you can put an image in this S3 bucket, and you also can configure your Lambda function to be triggered on this particular event. And for example, you can put the JPG file, so like a picture or something like this. And on this particular file, Lambda function will be triggered. It may, for example, analyze what is appeared on this picture, or it may just create the thumbnail of this picture, so some smaller one if you would like to use it in your web page, not to render all of these big pictures if you don't need it. And if you're talking about the SNS, so yeah, it's pretty the same. So if you have some events on the SNS Amazon, and these events may trigger this Lambda function, or in other words, Lambda function may be triggered by appearing of any kind of events in the SNS. So, and there is actually a bunch of examples for this one. But since our task number 3 is mostly related to the API Gateway, we will just briefly talk about the rest. And the last one is stream, so poll-based. In this case, you can think about some, let's say, enormous amount of data, which is frequently just streaming in your, it may be actually DynamoDB or Amazon Kinesis, or just anything. So just a stream of data by the creator of this data stream. You can think about maybe some IoT devices. So it's a kind of sensor which is continuously streaming the data about the environment. And what can you do with it? So you can just create a Lambda function which will be triggered to somehow change this data and then put it in some appropriate place. So for example, you don't need to store it in the you'd like to store it in your database, but you can just take this kind of JSON and just put it in in the database. Actually, you can. Yeah, you can create a virtual machine, install some kind of parser for this data, and this data will be transformed and transferred to this database. But in this case, we can just leverage the Lambda functions. So whenever any kind of data will be received by the Amazon Kinesis, or this data may be put in the DynamoDB, Lambda function may be triggered, transform this data, and put it in the appropriate place where it needed to be. And then we also have the API Gateway. So we can just create a Lambda function, but it will be not somehow secured by the AWS. So it will be just a direct URL which you can trigger, and it will return you some kind of data, or just something, just whatever you will tell it to do. But leveraging the API Gateway, we can secure these Lambda function endpoints. So we can say that this Lambda function is not directly accessible anymore. So it may be only accessed by the API Gateway, from the API Gateway URL. And on the API Gateway, we may say that for every request to this particular endpoint, so in our case, it will be blah, blah, blah / products or something like this. This request should be authorized. And to authorize it, there is actually plenty of options. How can we do it? So, and there is also AWS Cognito service, which can help you to create token for these users, and then authorize these users by their token against the against this Cognito endpoint. Is already a question. What is meant by gateway in terms of API? I'd say it's kind of a router. So whenever you need to route somehow your request, so in this case, the API Gateway will be an entry point for all of your requests. So whenever your application will get a request, it will be welcomed, let's say, by the API gateway. And only API gateway will make a decision on where to route your this particular request. So will it be first, second, or maybe third Lambda function? It doesn't matter. So it depends on the path which is provided by the URL or by the actually by just whatever, just some kind of metadata or the payload of this request. And in this task, we will only work with the API gateway and the Lambda functions. Now let's have a brief look at our task schema. So I don't remember actually, will we work with in our front end part of our application? I believe, yep. But yeah, let's mostly concentrate on the API gateway and Lambda function. So as you can see, in this task, we will need to create the Amazon API gateway. This API gateway will be an entry point for the requests such as get products list, get products by ID, or create product. And I'm not sure if create product is a part of this task, but yeah, we will see. We will have a look at these at our repository. So if you're talking about the get products list, so whenever someone is requesting your API gateway endpoint and saying, okay, so API URL / products, API gateway will trigger Lambda function. And this Lambda function should just go to the database, or in this task, it will be, I guess, mock data or something like this. So this database should take care of retrieving this data and providing it back to the requester. If you're talking about a get products by ID, so it's actually the same. We will have a mock data, and by reaching the API URL / product / product ID URL, we are expecting to see the particular product of this mock data. And once again, whenever we are reaching the API gateway with /products / product ID, API gateway will trigger the Lambda function. Lambda function will take this data and provide it back to the requester. And if you are talking about the create products, it's actually the same. So we'll say we would be kind of endpoint like create product, I guess, or something like this. And in this particular case, we will also provide the type of this product and some information about this one. So like amount of this product on our warehouse, name of this product, and so on. And in this case, Lambda function will be triggered not to give us some data, but to put this data in our database. So, but yeah, it's in the scope of further tasks, but just for understanding. Let's maybe have a look at in our repository. Unfortunately, I still not succeed with creating the environment for this one, so I can show you the deployed application. But I think I will provide you with the link to the previous stream, so from the previous run, and where I explained it so much. So yeah, you will have an understanding what is expected to be, what is expected from you at this task, and how to evaluate the tasks of your fellow students. Okay, now bear with me for a second. So if you have any questions, I think it's such a good time to ask them. While I'm looking for in our repository and in our task. Yeah, so here we go. Let me share my screen. Like this, I guess. Yeah. So here we go. Task number 3, Serverless API. So this is a place where you can find some useful videos. I'll also send you the links to the previous runs, as I already mentioned, in the Discord. Let's have a look at the task. Oh, what a what a mess. Okay, this part should explain how our repository should look like. But something just went wrong. Let me have a look at my... Yeah, it was mine commit. Yeah, it should look somehow like this. So yeah, I'll fix this one. So just for your understanding, right now we are talking about the product service. So product service is responsible to retrieve data about the particular product or just create create the specified product. And next we will talk about the import service and authorization service. But I suggest you to already create such kind of tree for your application. And I'm not actually sure. Yeah, I believe we had two repositories. So first one is for the front end, where our application is stored and where it's built. And from this exact repository, we are just deploying our application. And the second repository is for the back end part of this repository. Actually, it's not a big deal if you will store it in one repository. It doesn't make any difference. But yeah, so just to understand, you will have you'll need to have the product service, input service, and authorization service. Okay, yeah, as I already mentioned, I will try to fix this mess. Sorry for it. Create a Lambda function called getProductsList under the same AWS CDK stack file of product service, which will be triggered by the HTTP GET method. The requested URL should be /products. Okay, it's that kind of question in the chat. Yeah, sorry, just distracted a bit. Next, we will need to create another Lambda function, which will be responsible to get products by ID. So we should provide the this Lambda will be triggered by the /products/product ID URL. And in the free, we don't need to do almost anything. Yeah, it's just about the submission. Now, the thing which you should pay attention for. I'm not sure if we already fixed it in the application, but you will need to provide I'm not sure if it's more convenient for you to look at it like this, but yeah, I'll just go back so to make it in the center of my screen. So if you will have a look at your application repository, you will need to make some changes, and actually they are just marked in here. So we need there should be something like BFF, I believe. Let's have a look. Not this one, I guess. So yeah, it's just the services. Oh, there is already deployed something cool. Where is our application? src constants API puffs. Bear with me for a second. So I will try to figure out where all of the information is stored. Maybe there is any notification about this. Blah blah blah. Example is below. There is nothing about where is it located. Okay. Spend a couple of minutes and try to find it. So I can just show you how it looks like and how it should look. Queries, yeah, queries, I believe. Something like this. But it's card. We have it products. Yeah, here we go. But there is already a corrected one. So I believe you already have the API paths here. But if not, so you should change it to the API paths. Just to make just to get this part of the URL from the constants folder of our application. So as you can see, this commented once is just to deploy it locally and try to understand if everything works fine. But if you are talking about the sorry, but if you are talking about the products, you will need to change the product API path in this case. And as you can see, this is the API gateway URL. So in other words, we are just placing API gateway URL here, and our application just knows whatever someone tries to reach in our API gateway plus, for example, products, we will need just to do something. So things you need to do manually is just change these variables and make sure that you put your API gateway URL in the API paths of the constants folder. Let's have a look. Is there any other tasks? Yeah, exactly. So another 7 and a 5 points you can get by submitting the Swagger documentation. What is Swagger documentation? I think some of you may be already familiar with this one. So it's just a documentation which helps your users or maybe the maintainers of your application to understand how your API gateway works. So which requests you should do and what is the expected result. I believe I already created such a thing. Yeah, here we go. So this is just a YAML file, which consists of my which consists of the data of the endpoints of my API gateway. So in this case, it's just the API gateway, and then we have some endpoints. So in this case, it's products or products/product ID, and so on. The expected responses and the data that should be provided with these particular requests. And then when you will create this one, so there is a web page like let's try this Swagger.io, I think. Yeah, when you're trying to reach something once in a year, it's already kind of pain to remember which button to click. There should be something like deploy my Swagger or something like this. So you can just import your Swagger file in this application. So maybe it's not this one. Okay. Let's try just Swagger. Oh, it's editor. Yeah. Looks quite familiar. Come on. I think it's kind of test data or something like this. So let's get rid of all of this and just put my beautiful Swagger file in here. And let's have a look at what we'll get. Yeah, so this is how it looks like. So there is already now URL, so which is provided in the URL part of my YAML file. And there is also an endpoints, which should be accessible, but I believe this data is a bit outdated. So I'll need to change to update this API gateway URLs. And by running these queries by try it out and execute, I should get the information, but in this case, it should just give me something like 404 or something like this, just because this API gateway doesn't exist anymore. Sorry. Okay, so this is everything related to Swagger itself. Quite useful thing, and I believe from task to task you will need to update this one just to make all of the data as understandable as possible. So Lambda handlers are covered by basic unit tests. If I remember correctly, so there's we already had a concerns about this one just because it's not clear enough what should be doing this one. But yeah, whenever you are, whenever it will be possible to create some kind of unit tests for your Lambda functions, or just for the API gateway for your URLs, you will get additional 7.5 points. Lambda handlers. Actually, it's a good practice. I'm not actually sure if it should be the additional task, but whenever we are talking about the clearance of our code of our repository, I think it's a good idea to just separate all of these Lambda functions. So as you can see with my example, so I have an API gateway created for all of the products endpoints. And I also have the separate folder which contains the code which Lambda function running whenever this Lambda function is triggered. So yeah, it's just a good idea to create the separate files for all of it. And then just you will need only to import all of it, I believe. Yeah, you will need to just import all of it inside of your it's not unit test, it should be somewhere in here, I guess. Yeah, so this is just the place where I'm combining all of the Lambda functions and assigning it to the API gateway. So yeah, I'm creating the API gateway with these particular endpoints with Lambda functions. And the last one, main error scenarios are handled by API. So for example, product not found. So as I already mentioned, we will need to create the mock data, which will be used by Lambda functions to respond with this mock data. For example, you may have some 2 or maybe 3 products, but if someone will try to reach the 4th one, you should say that there is no such a product, so there is your 404 error, so which is not found, and it should look like somehow like products list, product by ID, I believe. Yeah, it should look like this. But I think in this case there is no mock data because I'm already using the database. But yeah, you should just avoid using these environment variables to connect to your database. You will need only the mock data located right in your Lambda function. I think that's it. Let's have a brief look at your questions. And I will also show you how to troubleshoot your Lambda functions and the places where you can find the logs for your Lambda function. What about database in this task? So yeah, as I mentioned right now, so you don't need to connect your Lambda function to the database. You should create the mock data somewhere in here. So let's assume I'm getting this data from the request to the database. So you may say something like data equals so product 1, product 2, and so on. So you can just create this data right inside of your Lambda function, and it will be enough. Because yeah, as you can see, I'm parsing this data and trying to understand how it should look like, and so on and so forth. What about Postman? Actually, I heard about this one, but I've never used it. So Postman sounds good. Why not? Do we need to deploy Swagger for convenience? You should just provide the Swagger to the as a YAML file in your repository. It will be enough. So, but if you manage to deploy it, so yeah, just provide the link to your Swagger, and it will be very cool. I think your fellow students will really appreciate it because it's much more easier to read it via the UI when reading just clean the YAML file. Can you use Amazon Q for this task too? Sure. Sure, you can, but just pay attention on what Amazon Q is suggesting you to deploy. Because if you are talking about the S3 bucket and just CloudFront, yeah, it's quite easy. But then starting to think about something a bit more complicated, Amazon Q may be a bit confused and may suggest you to deploy something just terrible. And actually, there is a bunch of resources in the AWS, but hopefully AWS will just block the creation of its resources for you. But yeah, some of these resources be very may be very costly for you. So yeah, just pay attention on what you're deploying and try to understand what Amazon Q and why Amazon Q is suggesting you to do this. And if you're talking about not Amazon Q, but maybe ChatGPT, it may be a bit worse, actually, just because the information at the ChatGPT may be a bit outdated regarding the regarding some particular resources in the AWS, because they usually continuously evolving, and there is some more implementations, some default features may be changed, and ChatGPT may be not aware about it. So yeah, using Amazon Q is quite convenient and maybe most proper way if we are talking about the AWS resources. But still, pay attention to what you deploy and try to understand. It will be actually very helpful for you because troubleshooting is much easier when you understand what you're doing. And now let me show you how Lambda functions looks inside of the AWS console. So once again, if we are talking about the deployment of our application on the virtual machines, it's quite easy. So you always can go to your virtual machine and try to read the logs, find some information, just try something manually. But if you are talking about the serverless resources, this is not the case. Just because we don't have anything, no, we don't have any virtual machine or just something where we can just go and just have a look and just search something. So we are forced to deploy in our Lambda function right to the AWS and just hope, but it will work. So right now I already deployed a bunch of Lambda functions. I'm not sure if it will work, once again, just because I created these Lambda functions a year ago, and I may be a bit not about it. But okay, let's start from the API Gateway, since it's an entry point. So we will have a look how it looks like, not on the code, but on the console. So we are going to the AWS menu. Okay, there's the one I just forgot to delete. So yeah, if you don't know, Google just providing you with the free token for their AI model. So you can use it. I just had some fun with it, just forgot to delete. So here is in our endpoint, in our API Gateway. On this API Gateway, we have two endpoints, and both of them serves only for GET requests. First one is products, and the second one is products/product ID. So this is what is expected from you. There's nothing complicated on this one, and everything will be quite convenient and neat on your code. And there is not much you can break, because we are just assigning, we are just creating the API Gateway, creating the endpoint of this API Gateway, and then just assigning the Lambda function on this exact endpoint. So in this case, it's product. And as you can see, there is a Lambda function, a Lambda integration. If I'll click on this one, I'll be prompted to, I will be provided with an option just to click on it and go to my Lambda functions, the exact one which serves all of the requests for products/product ID. So let's do this, and let's have a look on what's inside. And inside of this Lambda functions should be my code. As I already mentioned, there is a database connection, but you can just get rid of all of it and just create your personal mock data. And it will be enough to serve all of these requests. So when you will just have an option to go, actually, let's try it. Why not? So let me have a look on the stages. Yeah, here my URL. And if I go to this one and let's say products, internal server, okay, for some reason. I believe there may be already authentication for my Lambda function. I don't know. But who we are not to try to troubleshoot it. Okay, so let's have a look. This is my API gateway, and this is the URL. So for some reason, it just gives me the 505 error, missing authentication token. Okay, makes sense. How can I get rid of it? Lambda authorizer. Let's have a look on the function. So as you can see, the first part of this Lambda function, it's not product by ID, it's get products. So products list. Yeah, this one should serve all of my requests. Okay, yeah, I believe it doesn't work just because it doesn't have the connection. So let's have a look what kind of data should be provided by the database. So it's something like what is item? Okay, I'm just creating for item. Okay, yeah, makes sense. So should it be something like list or let's have a look if it already provided with some kind of mock data in here. How it should look like. Nope. Nothing like this. If there were anything in the repository for the AWS developer. In videos, we mentioned using serverless tool, serverless deploy. And in the README CDK is mentioned. What do we have to use? If I remember it correctly, so in the further tasks, there will be kind of penalty for using serverless API. I don't know why. Maybe just because it's outdated. I actually don't know. But I'll suggest you to use CDK just because I believe it's more modern way to manage all of these resources. Let's have a look at the fourth one. Yeah, this is how it looks like. So minus 50 points just if you use serverless framework. Doesn't make any sense for me actually, just because I'm not familiar with this one. But still, yeah. So I'll suggest to use the use CDK. Which programming language we should use in this task? Whichever you want. So feel free to choose which one you are familiar with. So I believe this is how this data should look like, by the way. So blah blah blah, dump in the database. But if we are talking about the database, we can just try to put it in here like this. Let's make it a bit more clean. Like this, like this. No, actually, okay. Let's try this one. So we have an ID. Let's choose something which is a bit more convenient to use. So for count item in count items, I believe it should be product items. So products should be a list of these values. So we can just put it in. Okay, we can get rid of this one as well. We don't need the database connection, and then they have a count table. I believe it's something which counts in our items in the on the stock. And it just returns the list of in our product dictionary. Count, price, product ID. I think that's good so far. So we can just try to return the, oops, let's do it like this. Price should be like this. Like this. Description doesn't make any sense right now, so it should be just title. Okay, for some reason where's back quotas? Okay, everything looks good so far. And then we will create the values. Okay, I guess it will not work, but at least why not to try? Okay. Hopefully I'm not missed anything. Now, in order to test in our Lambda function, we can just run test. By running test, we can provide some data, which will be kind of payload to our request. But I believe we don't need anything right now. So event sharing settings, let it be my Lambda test. Create new event. Yeah, looks good, looks good. And we will just save this one and test. Something just went wrong. But now we can always go to the logs. So as I already mentioned, Lambda functions is just the functions which are located in the AWS. So if we are talking about the troubleshooting them, AWS provides us with the logs for each run of this Lambda function. So we can just click on the logs right here, or we can let's just open the new window and just try to go to the search bar. Let's find the CloudWatch. CloudWatch is also an AWS service which provides us with logs. So it may be not only logs for your Lambda functions, but also for the API gateways, DynamoDBs, and just whatever. Even if you are deploying your virtual machine, just web servers, web server or EC2 instance, all of the logs from these places may be stored in the CloudWatch. So now we can have a look at our Lambda function, which should be gets products list, I believe. Yeah, the second one. And as you can see in here, so time is UTC, so it's something like 10 minutes ago. Okay, whenever we are deploying the Lambda function, yeah, for some reason I still don't see any recent information about it. So just an initial start, and then they have some logs, but for some reason our Lambda function doesn't work. API call. Okay, in this case, I believe by API call, it means the API call to the DynamoDB, which is actually doesn't exist right now. It makes sense. It makes sense. Let's Let's have a look if there is something new. Unfortunately not. So maybe let's go ahead by this link. And let's see, maybe we are stored in the any other places. Yeah, for some reason. What's wrong? Get products by ID. But I believe that I tried to run get products by ID. Yeah, it's my fault. So let's go to the Lambda function, which should give me, because if they're talking get products by ID, it expect me to provide the particular ID, which I didn't. So it should be like get products list. And now, for some reason, it just doesn't save in here. Why though? Okay, let's go back to the previous one. Get products by ID. And let's have a look on the code. Then products list. Yeah, for some reason it's just deployed in the 4 different places, but I need to have a look at my code. Yeah, it's definitely something wrong with it. So yeah, but right now, since we are talking about the get products list, once again, let's get rid of all of the connections to the database, and let's just put our mock data in here. Now we can just test it, and it will be test private. I don't need anything in here. If I'm running test, okay, now we have something new. And now if we will go to the previous page where I tried to find it, so here you can see get products list. If I refresh this one, I will have another entry. And this entry will provide me with all of the information about what's happened with this particular run. And if I just try to run this Lambda function once again, so where is it? Come on. Here you go. So if I will just try and run once again, I will get another bunch of data in here. Okay, maybe not immediately. Come on, what time is it? Okay, yeah, here we go. I believe it's this one. So still the same. We have an error. Handle inspection, most likely cause. What's wrong with you? Will it have values? Yes, definitely. Can it cover it in the JSON? Hope so. Okay, maybe let's try to do it like this. So, if I put it in the list, not sure if it should work. Okay, maybe let me have a look by myself. So just to understand how to mock this data and how it should work actually, or maybe I will just try to find my previous deployments. So basically we just configure Lambda functions only with UI, which doesn't return anything on user action events. Not really. So in this task, we need to deploy API Gateway via the CDK. And with this API Gateway, we'll also need to deploy the Lambda functions. So once again, as you can see on this structure, so I have the product service, which consists of the API Gateway, get product by ID, and get products. And for 2 of them, for get product by ID and get products, I'm getting the Lambda function as a handler. So in this particular example, I'm just creating the Lambda function. And I'm saying, okay, just make Lambda function, but get the code for this Lambda function from the Lambda func folder and find the product list handler. So here you go. Product list handler looks like this. Yeah, Ilya, thank you so much. It makes sense. So we just changed the UI a bit. Deploy and deploy changes. Okay, let's do this. It makes sense. Actually, you are right. So it may be the case. Then we will go to the tests once again and change our Lambda function and try to have a look on what's happening. But it's still 400. But now we can go to the CloudWatch. Is it the correct one? It's YD once again. Yeah, my fault, sorry. So let's go back to the code and just deploy this Lambda function. Once it's deployed, let's go back to the tests and try to run them once again. Okay. Products list, invalid syntax. Where? Line number 10. And actually, if you're talking about the tests, so which we're making locally, so yeah, it's the most convenient way just to test it and get the output. But if you're talking about some external requests, it's much more convenient, and maybe it's the only way to have a look at the logs, is just to go to the CloudWatch and found this Lambda function. So line number 10, yeah, definitely comma is missing. Not sure if I need this one. Let's deploy it once again. Please, good advice. How can debug with script in Lambda in case it works not correct? Now, I think first of all, since we're working with the mock data, it's better to try to run your code just to avoid such mistakes which I did. So just missing commas and so on. Now, once you're ready, so you can deploy your Lambda function right here in the AWS using the CDK. And then just go to the Lambda function console and try to run the tests from this one. And if it looks good, so still something. Code syntax error, it's 15 right now. So as you can see, the debug process looks like this. So what am I missing? Brackets closed. This one looks good so far. Let's have a look at the output once again. Syntax error. Unexpected ident. Oh, okay. Yeah, makes sense. Maybe, or maybe not. So it's just a function. Return on the proper way. This one on the proper way as well. Can't see anything. The rest looks good. JSON. Yes, have this one. Okay, let's try it once again. So yeah, this is the most proper and maybe convenient way to deploy and troubleshoot the Lambda function. Let's try to test it once again. product cycles list. Okay, what's wrong in the view? Come on. 14. Ah, yeah, makes sense. Okay. Yeah, should be like this. Why don't use Amazon Q? I don't know. I just don't like these LLMs and all of this AI. Sure, sometimes we are very helpful, but talking with them and starting to develop any context for them is sometimes just make things a bit more harder. Just because if you are talking about some problems without the context, so sure, actually you're right. So I can just feed all of this code to the Lambda, to the Amazon Q, for example, or just any LLM, and they will say, okay, you just messed up the indentation in this place, and you just missed the comma or something like this. But I'm much better enjoying troubleshooting it by myself. So finally, as you can see, it works. So we have something green and status code is 200, which means everything looks good. And now I think we are good to test in our application, not by running Lambda function, but by trying to reach the API gateway. So let's go back to the API gateway and let's have a look at this URL. So products ID, just because it's run Lambda function. Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so it should be just products. Not sure if I can click on it. Let's try. What will happen? Okay, yeah, looks good. So as you can see, I just tried to reach the API gateway / products. And in this case, Lambda function was triggered just to give me this data. So what? Come on, show me what time is it? Okay, it's 57 minutes right now, but we don't see the logs for this Lambda function just because they're constantly updating the folder. So once in 10 minutes or whenever you redeploy your Lambda function, the folder for your Lambda logs will be updated. So always just go back and try to find the latest one. So in this case, it's this one, so 5056. And here you go. This is, you can see the logs of this particular run of this Lambda function. So I just reached the API gateway, got the information, not this, but this, yeah. And all of this was logged in the CloudWatch. And what else interesting we can see in the Lambda function logs? Not only the information on how it just ran, but also the report. And this report tells us what was the size of the container. Actually, all of these Lambda functions running on the containers of the which is provided by the AWS, but it's not in our responsibility. So we are just provided the information what size, what was the size of this container for an our Lambda function. Memory used for this Lambda function, and it's also the you can manage all of these values by yourself, and the duration. So it was only 1.5 of milliseconds, and so I was built for 2 milliseconds of this Lambda function run. But if you are talking about the free tier, you will have some. Okay, let's have a look. What is the amount? So free tier Lambda function. On the free tier, where is it? Come on, show me something like free tier account. Yeah. So here we go. 1 million free requests per month. I think it's more than enough for you to understand how it works. So I've never saw someone complaining about it was charged for using the AWS Lambdas on the free tier account. So in my case, fortunately, I will be charged, but only 40 milliseconds. Hopefully it's not a big deal, and maybe AWS will say just, okay, it's much more expensive just to give you this bill. So yeah, they will just forgive me. So this is how it looks like. This is how it should look like from your end. So you will need just to create, once again, API Gateway, 2 Lambda functions, Swagger documentation, and just handle some errors. So in this case, okay, it's just the products list, but it should be also should be like products/4, for example. Will it work? Unfortunately not. So there is something that happened with this one. So I can just go ahead once again to the CloudWatch and have a look on the logs and try to understand what's wrong with my Lambda function, and especially I believe this one. Come on, show me the code by ID, and we will see what once again it tries to reach the database and so on. So if we'll provide the mock data in it, everything should work. Any questions so far? Oh, I just forgot to remove the question. In local West code, I don't think so. Just because Lambda functions. Okay, yeah, actually, I'm thinking about something. No, I don't think so. But actually, I just can't say it's not convenient way. Just because you can create your code and you can ask any LLM just to create the code to provide the mock data and give some kind of response and structured JSON as an output. So as you can see, yeah, there's just a status code and body. That's it. And then you will just put it in here. Yeah, and don't forget about the course. I'm actually not quite familiar with such thing, but I try to understand how it works. Unfortunately, not succeed. But yeah, I finally figured out what is the thing which you should adjust, which you should put in your Lambda functions to make it like a policy translator between the API gateway and your Lambda functions. So something like this, I believe. There's a more convenient way. Oh, it looks like the same question, isn't it? Yeah, definitely. Can you use a third-party libraries for unit tests? Sure you can. I'm not sure if they will work. How should it work? So you should make kind of unit tests for your. Yeah, I'll just try to explain. Since I'm working as a systems engineer, I'm not familiar with the testing almost at all. So I just trying to figure out how it should look like. So you'll need to create the tests just to test your Lambda function. But can you trigger it from here? Yes, you can. So yeah, you can choose just everything because you don't need to push it to the AWS. So it's just a thing which you should check locally. Okay, yeah, I already created some year ago. Yeah, this is how it should look like. Something like this, I believe. So yeah, it's kind of tests which are located on the unit under the tests of on our backend repository. Maybe it's not a backend. Yeah, look, product service. Yeah, it should be not on the backend, but on the product service. So we have a different structures. So this is the one for the CDK, which you should initialize once again. So and one folder for the tests. So you can choose whatever you want, whatever is more convenient for you. So just I think this 7.5 points just for your effort. Can you explain again how we should structure our repository for this task? Yeah, the best way just to make it visible for you, I will just go ahead to the third, to our repository to the third task, and I will open the task.md. And for some reason, yeah, it looks like this, but I will try to fix this one. I don't know why it showed me on the preview what is structured well, but still, yeah, I'll fix it. But if you will go to the latest commit, and then you will see the changes. And this is actually the desired structure of an our repository. So just one repository with 3 folders, one for an our application, one for the front end. This is the place where your CDK to deploy front end part of an our application should be stored. And if you are talking about the task number 3, so you should deploy all of it on the backend folder. Inside of this one, you should create the product service. And you should put all of the code related to the third task in here. So it may be the single repository or just 2 separate ones, doesn't matter actually. How should unit tests be evaluated? Actually, same as the CDK code. So you should just find these tests on the pull request, try to understand how they work, or if you don't like, so just if you found them, so this is your 7.5 points. So so you should give this 7.5 points to this student if he just created something. I don't want to check all of these tests because it's up to you to make them or not. Usually, I believe companies require such tests for their applications. But in our case, it's just to follow the best practices. Once again, the same as for the Swagger. I can't say it's useless at all in this case, but it's good to understand how it works and where it should be placed and how can you work and create such things by yourself. So this is why we placed something like this in this course. Okay, so at this point, if you will have any further questions, please feel free to ask them in the Discord channel. Sometimes, yeah, I'm a bit busy, so I can't immediately answer you, but I'm trying to open Discord at least once a day. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the Discord channel or reach me directly. So I'd like only to mention that tomorrow is the last day where you should provide the checks for the students which were assigned to you by the cross-check. If you will not check for works, for jobs, or for tasks submitted by the other students, you will not get your own points. So this is the important thing to keep in mind. So you should do your job just to get your points. And I think the last point is that the deadline for this task will be Saturday, 23:39 UTC. So in Greenwich, it will be almost night, so something between Saturday and Sunday. But in your location, it depends on the time zone. So yeah, pay attention to this one. So you will have to submit it, hopefully on Saturday. That's it. Okay, so thank you so much for being with me today. Such a pleasure. So many questions. Yeah, hopefully this information helped you. But if you will have any further questions, go ahead, reach me in the Discord. I will try to help you anytime. And see you on the next week. And bye.